I have a proposal on the illegal immigration and mass deportation topic. Send illegal immigrants who are awaiting trial to build cities and infrastructure in the remote areas of the West and other places that need residential development. This will solve at least two problems at once. One, the need for detainment facilities, and two, it will also solve the housing shortage, which many people blame illegal immigrants, at least in part, for. Donald Trump has said he plans to use the military to construct detention camps around the country to house illegal immigrants while they are awaiting deportation. What a waste. Why would you build prison camps instead of beautiful, thriving cities? Also, who is going to be in those massive prison camps capable of holding over 1 million people once all of the illegal immigrants are gone? I know Trump's a businessman, but that is not a smart real estate development strategy. So have them build cities instead of wasting taxpayer dollars to use our military as a progressive FDR-style New Deal construction corps that produces nothing of lasting value. Instead, as labor becomes available, illegal immigrants awaiting their deportation hearings can build their own housing that can later be acquired and used to house United States citizens, alleviating the single greatest cost of living for several generations of American citizens. It would do much to solve our homeless problems. While awaiting trial, immigrant workers can still labor productively and be compensated for their labor when the fruits of their labor are sold to new occupants. This solves the humaneness problem of their needing to work for a living to support themselves and their families, and also the economic problem of needing to be provided for, fed, and clothed and so on in a prison at taxpayer expense. And it also enables them to continue living with their families until they are deported together as a family if that is what the jury decides. And we won't have to raise taxes to commission a standing army to build prison camps that will shortly become useless and worthless clutter in our beautiful countryside. So let me explain and give an outline of how this could work. I'm going to use the state of Utah as an example. Utah is in an ideal situation for such an experiment, although with some adaptation it could work anywhere that there is space. The majority of the population of Utah is concentrated in the center of the state, in the Utah and Salt Lake valleys, and there are very few cities of any considerable size outside of this very narrow corridor. Brief history lesson, one of the major reasons for this is that many settlers in the Utah Territory were effectively denied the full benefits of the Preemption Act of 1830 and the Homestead Act of 1862, which stunted the territory's settlement. They basically weren't allowed by the federal government to expand their settlements any further beyond a certain point, and that's why the state city pattern looks like it does. The pioneers really wanted to keep building settlements so that no matter which way you went, there would always be both wilderness and civilization close enough at hand, preventing urban sprawl, vertical buildup, and so-called smart cities and so on. But we were hemmed in by the federal government. Adding to that problem, in the Enabling Act of 1894, Congress imposed the following condition as a prerequisite to Utah's statehood. Quote, that the people inhabiting said proposed state do agree and declare that they will forever disclaim all right and title to the unappropriated public lands lying within the boundaries thereof, and to all lands lying within said limits owned or held by any Indian or Indian tribes, and that until the title thereto shall have been extinguished by the United States, the same shall be and remain subject to the disposition of the United States, and said Indian lands shall remain under the absolute jurisdiction and control of the Congress of the United States. Close quote. So this effectively limited the swath of land that Utah residents were allowed to settle to the narrow patch that is Utah and Salt Lake valleys, together with a corridor leading through St. George, Ogden, plus a number of other small satellite pockets of habitation, right? So this has led to these interior valleys being extremely built up, crowded, and expensive, with commute times that are threatening to rival those of the Bay Area and California. And this is one of the reasons why Utah's government has filed a lawsuit in the Supreme Court with the United States federal government over control of these lands. We'll see how that goes. But a little more background, because this gets personal. 2 years ago, as a delegate, I asked then Representative John Curtis what he was doing floating an amnesty program for illegal immigrants when he knew that illegal immigration had applied upward pressure on Utah housing costs, because they've got to live somewhere, right? He told me to my face in the presence of other delegates that he did not know any Utahns who were concerned about the problem of housing costs due to illegal immigration. And I had just witnessed 4 of my siblings, some of whom were earning at least solid middle-class income, get repeatedly priced out of the housing market in their ancestral homeland of Utah. So now, to be clear, illegal immigration is not the only cause of high housing costs. There's the Federal Reserve printing fake money like crazy and monkeying with our interest rates to ensure that housing remains unaffordable. And a fair number of people want their property values to go up without having to put in any work for it. Plus, Utah's historic crowding in effect by the federal government's control of most of Utah's land. Plus, even though it's technically a desert, it has become a very nice place to live and attracts many people from out of state. So all this is like a perfect storm for Utah housing prices being out of control. So Utah is absolutely an ideal candidate for experimenting with what illegal immigrant labor could do to solve our housing shortage and lower the biggest single cost of living in our state and in the nation. While there is sufficient underdeveloped territory under municipal and private ownership to lease lands to illegal immigrants for construction, if the lawsuit to recover Utah lands from the federal government succeeds, this plan can gain even more momentum by enabling us to establish cities fairly spaced out in presently uninhabited areas, putting descendants of the Native Americans who were found trespassing in a land legally purchased from their ancestors to where they can help make the desert blossom like a rose and just burgeon with possibility. So that's something we need to examine. So in case you're wondering if Utah desert can be developed into thriving cities, you didn't see the place nearly 180 years ago when the impoverished pioneers arrived. It was a desert. It still technically is a desert. But they applied elbow grease, and now the developed parts of this desert are among the most beautiful and desirable places to live on planet Earth. So there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't just have an immaculate paradise. There's no reason why you couldn't just have that within a 15-minute drive from anywhere in the state. And that's what we can get if we are willing to use that old pioneer recipe, elbow grease. That's what it's going to take. So there are several steps and things that we need to take into consideration if any deportation plan is going to succeed. First, my honest question here is, are we going to arrest the government officials who are responsible for mass illegal immigration? Because they're the primary ones at fault here. And if we don't hold them accountable for this, then are we really solving the problem? So that's number one. If the border is still Swiss cheese and federal enforcers can't be made to give a fig about securing the border, which is their exclusive responsibility, then we're just going to be playing a game of catch and release at taxpayer expense, which would really stink. So second, we can't deport anyone except with the conviction of a jury. No other body than a jury is authorized to make a determination of guilt and an accompanying sentence for any crime. All cases must be individually tried by a jury, or else we have forfeited justice, run afoul of due process and the rule of law, which are the very principles that make America great. So if you want a reference on that, that's Article 3, Section 2, Clause 3 in the United States Constitution. So we need jury trials. That's got to happen for each and every one of these people. Otherwise, it's illegitimate. Indictments should be issued in priority order by a grand jury for those whose behavior warrants detainment and possible deportation, and also prioritizing those who are not in critical demand by a current employer. And this just needs to be done gradually and wisely. We need to respect reasonable replacement time for employers for those jobs that these illegal immigrants are currently occupying, and also allow time for relocation. Those are things we need to bake into this. And a trial jury can then hear each case individually for those who've been indicted and sentenced with deportation if that's deemed best by the community, to be their best path, or possibly granting an opportunity to apply for a reasonable temporary work permit for a worker and his family on terms that are acceptable to the community that they reside in. Or in exceptional cases, maybe they could even recommend a path to citizenship, although no path to citizenship is to be deemed necessary for anybody who is here illegally. So that's not a go-to. So point number 3, families need to be kept intact. No separation of families should be allowed except for very brief and timely detainments as necessary, if necessary, while awaiting trial. And this is basic human decency and common sense. If we go with building cities instead of prison camps, then they can be comfortably detained in the new residences that they just built. And if they're going to be living with their wife and kids, they're going to have a pretty strong incentive to make the living places very comfortable and valuable on the resale market. Point number 4, the economic impact of deporting likely upwards of 5% of our labor force, much of it critical infrastructure, overnight would be catastrophic. Any plan that purports to be able to deport them all rapidly is impossible. A prerequisite to the complete deportation of illegal immigrants is the raising up of a new generation of trained workers capable of replacing them. This necessitates having babies in intact American families, a complete overhaul of our public school systems, replacing all gender ideology and woke essay writing with on-the-job training, internships, apprenticeships, and qualifications for skilled labor in an essential trade. I have no problem with having the necessary migrant workers here legally for the time being, as long as we are moving with sufficient, reasonable speed towards complete self-sufficiency. You see, that's part of the problem with illegal immigration. That's part of the reason why they're here, is because we are not self-sufficient. That is one of the primary economic incentives for them to come and replace our jobs. And this is why people in our own government have been abetting that, right? It's because we, the people, have just not been stepping up to the plate. And demographically speaking, your average American doesn't want those jobs, right? So the problem can't be resolved without an actual working plan of full replacement for all of the economic value that they provide. Until we have that, we can't get rid of them. That's something we've got to step up to the plate and do. And that's something that our public school system could help out with, if only we refocus our priorities on what actually matters, okay? That is earning a living and taking care of our families. All right. So our youth urgently need the work ethic, the numbers, and the skill to bridge this enormous gap. So there's no realistic possibility of doing it on a time frame shorter than we can recruit and train ample replacement labor. Point number 5 here. Detainment while awaiting deportation hearings could be very costly if it's implemented poorly. So if they're needed to be detained somewhere while they're waiting for a hearing, again, this is actually the first recommendation I made at the beginning here, is have them relocate with their families to undeveloped or underdeveloped sites in Utah or whatever state. Release federal lands to the state as required for commissioning building zones for new cities. Have them go in and lay the infrastructure. The taxpayers will need to pay for materials to build the new infrastructure for towns and cities, but that is a drop in the bucket compared to the expense of the alternative plan, which requires that new infrastructure be built anyway, but it's just that most of it would become useless because it's prisons instead of cities. And if you can think of a more economical way to address our housing shortage sustainably, I would love to hear it. So it would be a great bargain, frankly. A lot of really great breakthroughs in the housing market here. So cities, just by way of how to do this sustainably, there's actually a really great recipe that the pioneers of Utah used. It's that they would place cities at regular intervals throughout the state, so about a day's journey apart on foot in all major directions, and just fill out the land with cities that way. So you got plenty of wilderness in between them, but not so large a space that it ever becomes dangerous if you need to travel from point A to point B, right? That you're going to run out of supplies or something like that, or get lost, right? So at each location, you'd have this most efficient, innovative, and beautiful American city blueprint, which was ever used. It was used by the pioneers who settled here. I'll share a link to it in the description, to the original hand-drawn blueprints for it. It's a marvel. It's been praised as an engineering and a beautiful marvel. So, but under this plan, the cities are, the streets are on a grid layout. So that means you don't need a map to get from point A to point B. Just know the address and you know how to get there. It's one of the great things about old Salt Lake City. The part that's actually on a grid. And this is a boon for homeowners as well, because the whole city is divided into half-acre residential lots that are not subdivisible. So that makes like house hunting a breeze, because you don't have to worry about the lot size. Every single lot size out there, every single house is going to be on an adequately sized lot where you can put up a big garden in your backyard and have a fruit tree orchard in your front yard and everything. Plenty of space for kids, plenty of space for workshop, anything you want, anything you need to sustain life, right? So and yeah, like the total city extent is also not supposed to exceed like about a quarter sorry about a mile and a quarter square miles. And anyway, so this is like I'm just sharing some of the attributes of these ingenious cities, right? And frankly, part of the reason why I'm mentioning this is because I think we have like just lost the know-how of like how to even build cities, and that's one of the problems in Utah right now is we have these just urban sprawl, and you know what used to be farmland being bought up for massive townhomes and apartment complexes and stuff and businesses. It's just getting way too built up, and that's contributing to our runaway housing costs and commute times and criminality and accidents on the freeway, you know, causing congestion and all of that stuff. So we don't want to become the next Bay Area. We just don't. And that means we need room to grow. And so we need a pattern. We need a blueprint. So yeah, that's why I'm sharing that. So but yeah, you have the illegal immigrants go out there, and while they're awaiting their hearing, because it's going to take a fair amount of time to process all of these, but just you know, when your number comes up, you go out with your family and you just go start building a city, you know, and build houses for people to live in. So they build the roads and the infrastructure connecting the cities. They supply them with water and power, sewage lines, waste disposal, and yeah. And then when their time arrives to depart or remain on a temporary worker status, whatever, they can sell the house they built or improved with their own hands to the next occupant, right? And since all this can't be done at once, you know, we've got to do it in a prioritized manner. Prioritize removing those who are the worst offenders first, right, or those who are least crucial in their current employment, and so they're consequently most flexible in relocating, right? Um, but yeah, we can do this in a way that respects people's rights, and so yeah, this is they need the opportunity to remain gainfully employed if they are right now, and that's for multiple reasons. Again, it's because their families depend on them for breadwinning, and we also depend on them as part of our economy, right? So we can have this gradual phase out strategy, and whenever there's a gap, an interim where they do have the flexibility to relocate rather than a prison camp, I would much rather that they be building these cities. Okay. So yeah, just I think this is a no brainer. So yeah, this will solve the problem of housing availability, and it will enable the labor force in the state to reclaim these portions of federally controlled lands. We'll have the elbow grease to do it, so we'll be able to so this will solve the problem of housing ability in the state and provide the labor force necessary to reclaim portions of federally controlled lands at reasonable and space out at reasonable geographic intervals, cities that we can inhabit and move, and because we need space in order to grow. This is not rocket science, right? It's just we as a country, I think, have practically forgotten how to build new cities, and so we're just building up the old ones, and they're getting massive, right? And that leads to a lot of crime, corruption, and that actually abets illegal immigration. These massive cities, because people can't vet who's coming in, right? So keeping the city sizes limited is actually a key to national security. Surprise. It's also a key to remaining connected with your representatives, but more on that maybe in another video. All right. Okay, so finally, there are some serious legal and constitutional considerations that we would need to be addressed in each state further. So in the state of Utah, there is currently a guest worker program that enables illegal immigrants to apply for this and to get a permit to remain as a temporary worker for a time if they qualify, and they have to renew it every 2 years, I think. As I understand it, though, this could be preempted. They do also pay a fine, by the way, if they're here illegally or if they overstayed their visa, they pay a fine to the state, right? This could be preempted by a deportation mandate by the federal government. So this would require rewriting the state law to bring it into conformity with the new federal requirements. But crucially, every case would still have to proceed to a jury trial. You'd have to have a jury to hear every one of these cases. Otherwise, we're not constitutionally legitimate. Because yeah, you can't just like have federal agents come in or state agents, whoever, come in and abduct people and then just force them to leave or ship them off to a prison camp. You can't do that without an impartial trial by jury of your peers, of citizen peers. because you have to prove guilt, and their own community has to consent to the extradition. Nothing short of this would actually respect the constitutional uh, guarantees of human rights or due process. So, and if the local community decides that this individual really is a great blessing rather than a liability, they can provide a check on the federal government's mandate. And I don't expect that to be common, but in any case, that's what the Constitution says: is you can't prosecute a person without a jury trial, and you can't just steamroll the jury's verdict. If they say not guilty, then it's not guilty, and if they say guilty, then okay, the community's decided this person's not eligible to remain based on the law and their finding of fact, right? So yeah, in summary, don't build prisons, build houses. Build beautiful cities and communities. Keep families together. Let a jury of citizen peers from their own community decide the case. You have to respect the principle of double jeopardy as well. The federal government is responsible to secure the border. They alone are responsible to do that. But, the federal government cannot ultimately decide what is best for each community, nor can it overrule the express will of the people embodied in the ultimate check on the government, which is the constitutional jury. So yeah, I'm not asking for amnesty for illegal immigrants at all. I'm simply asking, why would we build prison camps at taxpayer expense that will all soon be worthless, ugly zits on our beautiful country, and use them, if we're going to use these prisons to house and feed illegal immigrants at taxpayer expense, then when the working illegal immigrants could at least be gainfully employed in building housing, and then we can actually use that housing when they have been deported, and they can keep their families intact all the way through and still be, financially compensated for their labors. I think this is a win-win-win everywhere. Let me know though what your thoughts are. I know you have an opinion, so please share it, and how this idea could be made better. Thank you.